Ooh, what is up, gamers? Today we're going to be ranking every evolution inside of Clash Royale from worst to first. Starting with the worst evolution in the game, it's gotta be Evo Goblin Drill. Ever since this card got nerfed a few seasons ago, it really hasn't been viable. That's sometimes the problem you run into whenever you have a win condition as your evolution, because a lot of times it doesn't make sense to run the win condition as your Evo as much as it does the support cards. And for Goblin Drill, you'd much rather use Evo Ice Spirit, Evo Cannon, Evo Wall Breakers, anything but the Evo Drill itself. There's literally no reason to use Evo Drill over the other Evos that could possibly fit in the deck, and that is why it is the worst evolution in Clash Royale. Still in the F tier, number 29, we have the Evo Snowball. I don't care how many times they rework or buff this card, it is just plain bad. And it doesn't fit into many deck archetypes other than like cheesy Expo decks. And plus the other 2 elixir spell, Evo Zap, is so much better than Snowball, so just via comparison, it doesn't really make sense to use Evo Snowball. That's why it is the 29th spot. And by comparison, the other 2 elixir Evo spell, Evo Zap, is so much stronger than Evo Snowball, so it doesn't really make sense to use this card. Number 28, still in the F tier, is the Evo Tesla. It used to be so good, and then it got nerfed into the ground, and now it is by far one of the worst evolutions, especially compared to the Evo Cannon that is light years ahead of this card. Pretty much the only deck that can run Evo Tesla is Expo, and oftentimes Expo players don't even run it. That is why it is number 28 and the last card in our F tier. Number 27 and the first card in our D tier is Evolved P.E.K.K.A. Who would have thought, huh? This card used to be at the top of the tier list. It used to be number 1, number 2 best Evo, but her range just made her completely useless. Not completely useless, like obviously P.E.K.K.A players, like if you're a P.E.K.K.A main, it makes sense to still use her, but she doesn't fit in any other decks. The nerfs to her range and her healing buffs made her just a much more well-balanced and honestly just weaker Evo. They nerfed her range and they nerfed her healing abilities, and now she's just a pretty weak evolution. Number 26 is the Evo Battle Ram. Honestly, any card from this point on is actually viable, but it usually only fits in like 1 or maybe 2 deck archetypes. And I wouldn't even go as far as to say that this card is bad, it is just much worse than all of the other evolutions on this list. This card could work in certain Three Musketeer decks or Bridge Spam decks or even P.E.K.K.A decks, but it is still weaker than all of the other evolutions on this list. And at number 25, we have the Evo Wizard! Also once a pretty broken evolution, but now I would say he's actually much more balanced. For 5 elixir, he's kind of an expensive evolution, where a lot of other evolutions only cost 3 or 2 or 1 elixir or 4 elixir, and they pack such a punch. So for 5 elixir, this evolution is just a little too expensive, it's hard to cycle to it, and it doesn't really get the value that a lot of the other cheaper evolutions do. Number 24 is the Evolved Archers. Once again, a very balanced ranged evolution, but there are a lot better ranged evolutions in the Evolved Musketeer and the Evo Firecracker, so there's not a great use case for the Evo Archers in most competitive decks. Sometimes you can see it in like giant graveyard decks and a few Expo decks, but with them dying to arrows for an even trade, they're just really not that menacing. Coming in at number 23, we have the Evolved Musketeer. In my opinion, I would rather have these than the Evo Archers any day. The way that she can just obliterate an entire elixir collector or a building is so good in certain 2.6 and balloon cycle decks. It sounds kind of weird to say, but she's probably one of the most balanced evolutions on this list, which is why she's down at number 23. Moving up a little bit from the last time I made this list, number 22 is the Evolved Barbarians. Honestly, these cards used to be completely useless, but with all of the beatdown in the meta, Evolved Barbarians have kind of found their place. You can see them in some off-meta Lava Hound decks, and you can see them in some giant graveyard decks, but they're still D-tier evolutions. Our final D-tier evolution is going to be the most annoying card in Clash Royale, the Evolved Firecracker. While she does die to arrows similar to the archers, usually she's used in very, very fast cycle decks. You can usually outcycle your opponent's arrows and get so much defensive and offensive value with the Evo Firecracker. The synergy that this card has with a lot of hog cycle decks or drill decks is just absurd. Similar to like a magic archer at the bridge, if she's played well and she's played properly with the pressure, it is damn near impossible to stop this card. She gets a lot of value for 3 elixir, which is why she is rounding out the top of my D tier evolutions. Starting off our C tier cards at number 20, we have the Evo Royal Giant. Pretty much all of the cards in this tier list are going to be perfect evolutions where they're not too broken and they're not too weak. And that's exactly what I think of when I think of the Evo RG. I'm definitely fearful when my opponents have it in cycle, but it's not game breaking, it's not broken. It's a 1-cycle evolution for a 6 elixir card, which is so reasonable. And it makes your opponent respect you because they can't defend with swarms, they have to defend with like a mini tank or a building, and it can help you break through because of these awkward interactions. So that is why it captures my number 20 spot. Kind of in that same vein, that same train of thought with the win conditions, we have number 19, the Evolved Mortar. This one takes an extra cycle compared to the RG to get to the evolved version, but for only 4 elixir, that makes a lot of sense. Kind of the same concept where it's not game breaking, but the opponent absolutely needs to respect you and play different when you have the Evo Mortar in cycle. Just a very respectable and strong evolution, which is why it is a solid pick in my C tier at number 19. And at number 18, oh how far we've fallen, is the Evo Skeleton. Honestly, I think you could argue these guys could be a little higher, but they're just so bad compared to what they used to be. I think at top ladder and the high leagues of Ultimate Champion, this card is completely useless, kind of similar to like a skeleton army. But in lower leagues, I think this card could actually be very good, especially for 1 elixir. When they first announced the nerf, I didn't think that 3 skeletons was going to be that much worse than 4 skeletons, but it actually is. So now no one really runs Evo Skeletons, and they've dropped all the way from my old 1 spot down to the 18 spot. Next, number 17, pretty middle of the pack, is going to be the Evolved Hunter. And everyone thought that Evo Hunter was going to be the most broken evolution in the game, and it's just not. It is really strong. It is really good against beatdown, but having it be a 2 cycle, so every 3rd hunter is an evolved one, has really made it a much worse card than it could be. Combine that with the fact that it doesn't really provide any value on offense at all, it just provides defensive value. That's why it falls right into the C tier. And number 16 on my list is going to be the Evolved Royal Recruits. I used to have these guys a lot higher on my list, but following a recent set of balance changes, these cards are just really not that good anymore, especially for 7 elixir. There are so many good answers to spam nowadays. I feel like everyone runs splash cards in either a bomber or a baby dragon or a firecracker or a bomb tower or a bowler or a Valkyrie or an Evo Valkyrie, so there are just a lot of answers to Royal Recruits. And while I do think the base recruits are still good and strong and viable, I don't think it's worth using an evolution slot on it, which is why it locks in at the 16 spot for me. Coming in at number 15, we have the Evolved Mega Knight. I would say if you're a mid-ladder menace, this would probably be the number 1 evolution, but at like upper ladder, higher leagues of Ultimate Champion, this is like a middle-of-the-road evolution. It does provide great defensive value and pretty good value on offense, but it's actually just not that difficult to defend if you know what you're doing. And in general, any evolutions that are expensive and difficult to cycle to aren't as strong as the cheaper evolutions, as you'll see later in this list. Number 14 on the list is the Evolved Goblin Giant. Right in the middle of the C tier of win conditions that aren't that good, this one used to be one of the most broken evolutions in the game, but thank God Supercell nerfed it. Now it is still a very viable evolution, but you really only see it in traditional Goblin Giant decks. That is always the hallmark of when an evolution is too broken, is when you start to see it infiltrate other deck archetypes. But that is not the case anymore with this card. It is right where it should be at number 14 on this list. Finally, our last card in the C tier, number 13, the Evolved Electro Dragon. Honestly, a very good card, arguably one of the best defensive cards inside of Clash Royale. And it actually does provide a little bit of offensive value in Golem decks and Lava Hound decks. But honestly, this evolution is very slow and it's very predictable in terms of its interactions, meaning it's not too difficult to actually play around. While it is very polarizing against certain matchups, it's not by any means a broken evolution, which is why it is at the very top of our C tier. Moving into the B tier now, number 12 is the Evolved Dark Goblin. I honestly think this card is very slept on. I myself would maybe put it a little higher, but based on what I've seen and what I've read, I guess it's going to stick at the 12th spot today. I think the concept of the poison is so good, especially in very, very fast cycle decks like the Hypno deck. The Dark Goblin can be so menacing. But he's a bit of a glass cannon, he's a little fragile, but in my opinion, he is so much better than a lot of the other 3 elixir evolutions like the Firecracker and the Archers. But like I said, he's a glass cannon. He dies to login arrows, which is why he is locked in at the 12th spot. Coming in at number 11, we have the Evolved Goblin Cage. Now this might be a little higher than a lot of you would place it. Maybe you'd argue it'd be in the C tier, but since it is a 1 cycle evolution, I think that's crazy. That is why it falls in the B tier today. Great value on defense. It is a beat down killer, and the counter push as well that it provides is so worth it for only 4 elixir and a 1 cycle evolution. One of the best and most versatile evolutions inside of Clash Royale. Rounding out our top 10, we have the Evolved Bomber. I feel like a lot of people could put this card a little bit higher on the list. I think that's fair, but for me, it just falls in the 10th spot. While it does provide a lot of value for only 2 elixir, I think it's relatively easy to play around. Similar to that Dark Goblin, a bit of a glass cannon, it can't target air, so it is very good, a top 10 evolution, but not as good as it used to be when it had max range. So following the range nerf that this card received, I think it's perfect right where it is. It's one of the best evolutions in the game at number 10. Coming in at number 9, we have the Evo Goblin Barrel. By far one of the coolest evolutions in the game, and it's really opened up certain matchups for log bait players that used to be unwinnable but now are very much winnable because of the Evo Barrel. Typically with win condition cards, they're either really useless or just mid, or they're completely broken, but this is one of the more balanced but still kind of strong Evo win conditions. People used to argue that it was a little too broken, but now that it is visible and you can spot the decoy barrel versus the real barrel, I think it is pretty balanced as is and very strong in the meta, locked in at our number 9 spot. And our final B tier card is going to be the Evo Valkyrie. Again, arguably one of the 3 best defensive evolutions in the game. She is really good. She's so strong, especially at, I feel like, mid-ladder and upper mid-ladder. She is like the backbone of so many defenses. The fact that she can target air is just so crazy too. She's also very easy to use and provides so much defensive value for only 4 elixir, so I'm gonna lock her in at the number 8 spot. Starting off our A tier cards, number 7, we have the Evolved Bats. I think Evo Bats are a little slept on, but the value that they provide for 2 elixir in a bunch of different decks, mortar decks, goblin drill decks, giant graveyard decks, is so slept on. Honestly, I think you could argue these could be a little lower, but for only 2 elixir, like a lot of the other 2 elixir evolutions, it just provides so much value. So a lot of times cheap evolutions are either going to be completely broken or not very good. But because of the versatility on offense and defense, we're going to lock these in at the 7 spot. Coming in at number 6, what do you know? Another 2 elixir evolution in the Evo Wall Breakers. This card was already really good before they buffed the damage that it does on defense, but at the same time, it's fairly balanced in the sense that if you just have a building, you don't even have to worry about this card. But for only 2 elixir, you can threaten to take half of your opponent's tower, and now, because of the buff, you can use them defensively to take out large swarms, so they are such a versatile card for only 2 elixir. And a solid number 6 choice. Top 5, let's do it, Evo Knight. I don't think I've ever made an evolution tier list and not had Evo Knight be in the top 5. I think the reason is because the card concept is so strong, as in if the opponent does not have a way to block it, it gets so much value as a tank, and it always will. If you don't have the proper card and cycle to stop an Evo Knight at the bridge against any sort of beatdown deck, or against Goblin Drill, or against Expo, it is honestly just GG's. Not to mention on defense, it could survive an entire 3 Musketeer push by itself. It is so strong, so versatile in so many situations, and really easy to use for only 3 elixir. Evo Knight at my 5. Coming in at number 4, we have the Evolved Zap. I think the contrast between this card and the Evo Snowball should be enough to tell you why this is one of the best evolutions in the game. The fact that a 2 elixir card can take out some 3 and 4 elixir cards is just insane to me. And I feel like people don't talk about enough how instant and how quick the zap is. There's no delay. There is no startup animation. As soon as you drop the Evo Zap, it is down. Compare that to the startup of a Snowball or a Log or a Fireball. It just dusts those cards. Locking in at number 4. Just missed the podium. Coming in at number 3, I would say the best bang for buck defensive card in the game, the Evo Ice Spirit. Like I said, for only 1 elixir to be able to double reset offensive troops is so powerful and so underrated. If you look at some of the best control decks in the game, Royal Hog Cycle, Minor Control with Magic Archer, they're all running Evo Ice Spirit. Mainly because it is so cheap and easy to cycle to it because it's only 1 elixir. But it is so powerful against insane offensive units like the P.E.K.K.A. or the Balloon or the Ram Rider. It is just so absurd the value that it gets for only 1 elixir. Did I mention that it only costs 1 elixir? Anyways, bronze medal for the Evo Ice Spirit. The silver medal, number 2, going to the Evolved Lumberjack. Maybe a little bit of recency bias here, but this card is genuinely very, very difficult to defend, even for competitive players. And I know that this and Evo Mega Knight are just shredding up mid-ladder. I said this at the start of the video, but the hallmark of a broken evolution is if you start to see it infiltrate a bunch of different deck archetypes, and that is exactly what Evo Lumberjack is doing. You see it in drill decks, you see it in hog decks, you see it in beatdown decks, you see it in bait decks, you see it in so many different decks, and that's how you know that it is just too overpowered. Great offense, great defense, easy to use, but difficult to defend, and that's why it earns my silver medal. And the number 1 best evolution in the game, without a doubt in my mind, Evo Cannon. I mean, still, what the heck is that ability, dude? It doesn't make any sense. It is so good. The amount of elixir you can just wipe off from the board is just insane. On top of that evolution ability being a bunch of baloney, the cannon is the best building in the game by far. I honestly forgot that we even had a bomb tower or a Tesla because no one uses them, they just use the cannon instead. The barrage ability does way too much damage and it has way too much range. Just take away one of the rows or something, man. It is so incredibly strong. And just like the Lumberjack, we see the Evo Cannon in 5 or 6 different deck archetypes. In my opinion, the best defensive evolution in the game and the best overall evolution in the game. Nerf Evo Cannon, Nerf Evo Lumberjack. And that is going to do it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. Please let me know your feedback in the comments. There's always people that disagree, as you should. I just ask that you comment your opinion respectfully. You don't have to insult me if you disagree with me. It's all good. It's good to have opinions. And I love reading your comments and I love hearing your feedback on the video and on my opinion. So I'm looking forward to reading through the comment section. I hope you all are nice to me. And I really hope to see you in another video real soon. Peace out!